Welcome to another episode of CCSD Earth Science. Today we're going to be talking about the different types of weathering and what causes them to occur. So the first type of weathering that we're going to take a look at is physical weathering, or sometimes it's referred to as mechanical weathering. Physical weathering is taking something and breaking it apart into smaller pieces. So you're changing the shape and the size, but not the chemical composition. So you're ending up with the same material, just in a different form, a different shape or size. So some different types of physical weathering, different ways that it can occur. One type is called frost action or frost wedging. And this happens because water will seep into cracks in the ground or in a rock or even in a sidewalk. If you're walking down a sidewalk, you'll notice there's a lot of cracks in the sidewalk around northern New York because the water gets in there, and when it freezes, water expands. And so as it's expanding, it actually breaks apart the rock. That's why if you drive around any roads around northern New York, you're going to see a lot of potholes in the springtime because that is the perfect time for frost wedging. The water during the day water is going to be liquid during the day, and then at night when we get some of the cooler temperatures, it freezes and then it expands and breaks apart the road. But then during the day, the next day, it heats up again, the water becomes liquid, and it will freeze again that next night, and it'll expand some more. And so you get this continuous freeze-thaw action that breaks apart the roads or your driveway or sidewalks. And the same thing happens in nature when we are looking at the mountainsides or even rocks just around in the bedrock. So the big thing with that is because of the freezing and thawing. If you're in an area where it's cold all the time, you're not going to get that change. It'll just stay one size, and it won't continue to expand even further. It won't make the crack bigger. It'll just stay the same. And same thing if you're in an area where it's really warm, it'll stay liquid, and it won't ever freeze and expand. So if you're going to have a lot of frost action, it's going to be in a place where the temperature alternates between above freezing and below freezing, like we have here. Something kind of similar to that is root wedging, where a plant, it may start out very, very tiny, and the roots are like the size of a strand of hair. They'll start growing into tiny little cracks in the rock, and as the plant grows, it gets stronger and bigger, and it will actually break apart the rock. If you've ever seen sidewalks where they're lifted up, and there's a tree right next to it, it's because of that. The tree that had good intentions of putting nice trees along the side of the sidewalks in villages, making the town look pretty, but if they put the tree too close to the sidewalk, and it's a tree that's going to grow really big, you're going to ruin the sidewalks because the sidewalk or the trees are going to grow bigger and bigger, and those roots are going to eventually start to uplift the sidewalk. So if you are going to plant a tree, you really want to pay attention to what's around it and how big it will be. You don't want to plant a maple tree right next to your house because that's going to eventually grow very large, and it can actually grow into your foundation. It can grow into pipes and things that go into your house, so that can cause a lot of damage. That's why usually you're going to plant smaller things near your house or near your driveway or sidewalks. Glaciers are another thing that can break down rock. They will actually, as they're moving across the landscape, will pick up pieces of other rock, and they get stuck to the bottom. And as they do that, they just scrape across the surface, and that scraping is changing and weathering the surface of the bedrock, and it will break it down. Wave action, okay, near a shoreline, the waves just coming in constantly, it will start to wear away at the shore. That's why a lot of houses that are near the shore, they'll build a stone wall, a barrier to protect the shore from being weathered and broken down. And another type is gravity. Gravity can cause rocks to fall, and if they fall, a lot of times they are going to break. So that is another way to break apart rocks. Now, chemical weathering is a little bit different. We're still breaking the rock down, but we're changing what we end up with. With physical weathering, if you have a big piece of granite and you break it down into a bunch of little pieces because of, say, gravity, it falls and it breaks, you still have granite. It's just little pieces of granite. Chemical weathering is changing what you have in the end. So rocks are exposed to the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. So the atmosphere is going to include the temperature and the climate of an area, and the hydrosphere is the water. And this changes the mineral composition. It creates new substances. And a perfect example is rust. Okay, you probably got yelled at as a kid for leaving your bike outside because it's going to rust. And the reason that happens is because the water will actually interact with the metal in your bike and the iron and start to change it. It will break it down and cause the formation of iron oxide or rust. And water is actually something that increases that process. So you see a lot more rust in our area because we have a lot more humidity. You go to some places out west and areas that are more like a desert, it's warm, but it's drier, so they don't have that weathering happening as quickly. Chemical weathering requires water. Water really helps to break down a lot of basic minerals, and so that can increase the rate of weathering. So heat also speeds up chemical weathering. If you are in a warm, humid climate, you're going to see chemical weathering happen a lot faster. All right, if you've ever made Jell-O, okay, you have the powder, you add water, but you heat it up, and that hot water allows the Jell-O packet, the powder, to dissolve much faster. And it's the same thing in nature. Okay, when you add warmer temperatures, a warmer climate, and you add a lot of moisture, precipitation, you're going to cause chemical weathering to happen sooner. Now, something else that affects weathering rates is surface area. How much of a material or a rock is exposed? And the more that is exposed to the atmosphere and hydrosphere, the water, is the faster it will break down. So if you look at just this big block, okay, you've got 6 sides that are exposed to the atmosphere. And if you take that and you break it down, okay, into 4 smaller pieces, now you've got all of those little sides that are exposed. So it's going to break down faster. So smaller pieces with more surface area will break down faster. If you have a large boulder and a bunch of little pebbles, the pebbles are going to break down faster because there is more surface area. That's why we chew our food. Okay, if you take an entire piece of candy, okay, and you put it in your mouth and you swallow it, it's going to sit in your stomach for a long time, and it's going to take a while for the acids in your stomach to dissolve it, to break it down. That's why if you chew your food, it'll be smaller pieces, there's more surface area, and your body can dissolve and digest it much faster, which is something you want. Okay. Something else that can affect weathering rates is the minerals that are in the rock. Okay. If you have minerals that are much harder, they are going to take longer to break down. And if you have a rock that contains much softer minerals, they will break down much faster. So the composition of a rock can also affect how quickly it weathers. If you've ever walked around a cemetery or even just looked at buildings that are made of different stone material, a building that is made of granite, which contains a lot of hard minerals, you've got quartz and feldspar, it's going to last. It's going to maintain its shape much longer than something that may be made of marble. Marble is going to have a lot of the softer minerals like calcite, and that will break down faster. Okay, so the materials that are used for different buildings, it is important to think about what you're using because it will, it can be affected by weathering.